Hi, this is going to be the first part of a series of videos for installing Oracle on Ubuntu 16.04 LTS. So for the first video, we're going to just install Ubuntu, which is probably familiar to quite a few of you already. I'm going to use the server edition running on background Windows machine. So the first step, I'll go into Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager and select New to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to call mine Oracle on Ubuntu. The VM software is quite good in there. It does change the type and the version based on the type of name that you type in, so there's less risk of choosing the wrong one to start with. I'm going to use the 64-bit version. I'll follow through the wizard for setting up the virtual machine, but it's not very much different to choosing expert mode, but I think it's slightly easier to set up using the wizard. So for the memory size, I'm going to increase that to 2048, which is about half of the actual host machine's total memory. I'm going to create a virtual hard disk. I'm going to use a bigger amount than the 10 gigabytes suggested. This just makes it a bit easier if you want to, if you find that the disk that you want to use is actually you need more space later on. Otherwise, it's a several step process, which I'll probably do a video on to increase the disk size later on. So I'll use a VirtualBox disk image, and I'll use dynamically allocated again. It's just easier later on if it's dynamically allocated. If you want to increase the fixed size disk later on, you need to change it to a dynamically allocated one first. I'll use the same name just for ease. And I'll say, for the size limit, I'll say 30 gigabytes, which is plenty of space, and isn't going to use a lot of space on the host disk. So the next setting I'll do is just go into storage and put in my into the CD drive the Ubuntu Server ISO image. So I've got a few images that I've already downloaded. So I've got the Ubuntu 16.04 LTS, it's 0.3. The latest version I think is actually 0.4, but we'll update that once we've installed it. Say OK. And now we can start our virtual machine, and this will take us into the setup process. So I'm actually based in Estonia, but obviously my language is English, so I'm going to choose English, and I'll discuss a little bit about locales and regions in the next few steps. So I'll choose just to install the basic Ubuntu server without any additional features. So again, for language, I'll choose English. For country, I'll choose United Kingdom. We'll change this later on once we've got Ubuntu set up, but I just find that it's easier to set it up as if you're in the country where you want everything to appear. So to give an example, it's just a bit easier with, say, days of the week. If I choose Estonia or or any other one that's a non-English country, then the days of the week will show in the local language. So I'll choose to detect my keyboard. Not sure what keyboard I detected there, so let's just configure the keyboard. Choose Y, W. Again, I'm going to say no to this, even though I do actually have this key, so that I get English keyboard. Let's say no to this one as well, no to this one, no to this one, no to this one, no to this one. Then for the pound sign, I'm going to say yes. Again, I don't actually have one on one of the keys. And now it says that my keyboard appears to be GB. Alternatively, you could have just chosen the keyboard from the full list. So it'll take a few minutes now whilst the components are loaded. Ready for installation. So for my host name, I'm going to call it Ubuntu. I'm just going to give it a number because I've got another Ubuntu running on another machine. So just to avoid confusion, I'll call it Ubuntu 003. And then I'll put in my full name here. Just like to call myself Paul W. Not that there's any other Pauls using the machine, but and then password as well. Re-enter to verify. So I've chosen a fairly simple password, mainly because I'm going to discard the machine later on at some point. I won't encrypt the home directory, but that's something you might want to do if you're going to use the machine as a more production-like version. So I'm going to say yes to the time zone. So again here I'll just use I'll set up the entire disk and use the logical volume manager. Then we just have the one option for the disk, which is the one that we set up earlier. And I'll write the changes to the disk and configure the LVM now. So I'll use the full amount. And write the changes. So in quite a few of the points where you need to commit to what you've chosen, then the non-committal option will be selected by default. The one slight disadvantage to not choosing a fixed disk size initially is that occasionally you will get a hang whilst the VirtualBox software is increasing the disk size. So I think it's when you're setting up the virtual machine, just need to. It's worth thinking later on about how the disk will be used. Is it likely to be increasing the usage of the space? And you can maybe just force that to increase once by creating a large file to force the disk to increase, delete the file, and then you've not used the full disk size, but you do have some room for growth there. So almost there now, 97%. So I'm not using a proxy. Continue. The other couple of videos I'll do will be setting up backups, doing cold backups of Oracle 11G, which is relatively straightforward, and also using RMAN to do hot backups. And I think the more important bit is to actually be able to test the recovery. So for automatic upgrades, I'm going to choose no, because I think it's just good to have some control over these before installing them, even with the security updates, as there was one recently which actually caused Linux not, or the Ubuntu version, not to be able to boot on the Oracle VM until a patch was updated. Again, I'm just going to choose the standard system utilities and not choose any extras. We can install those later on. They're all fairly simple to do, but I think it just makes it nicer for the machine that you only have installed what you know you need. Installing the server version of Ubuntu versus the desktop version means that there's a few additional packages that we need to install manually later on before we install the Oracle XE, which by packages which by default are installed with the desktop edition of Ubuntu. So 97%, so we're almost complete with the installation. So we can install the grub bootloader because we know this VirtualBox machine doesn't have any other operating system there, which is also what this message is telling us. It thinks that there isn't anything else. So the installation is finished. We can just go into our machine settings and take out the CD drive from storage. So actually, it's already taking it out. So yeah, it's already taking it out. So we don't need to change that setting there. So we can just continue here. The next steps, which I'll do, is setting up the network time and NTP package so that our clock is synchronized with the time service, and also installing the VirtualBox editions, guest editions. But I'll do that in the next video, as this one's already quite long. So there we go, so we can log in, username Paul W, and password as we chose it before. And as we can see, there's 126 packages that can be updated, and 64 of them are security updates. So I'll pause the video there, but in the next one we can continue from here, install these updates, which I'll just show the command line for doing. Do the Linux editions for the VirtualBox, and install the NTP package for synchronizing network time.